Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luer, and today we're heading to Paris to connect with my good buddy, Lucien Boyer. Welcome to the podcast, Lucien.
Well, good morning, Marcus, and good morning, everyone. Happy to be with you today.
Yes, good morning there in Paris. Most people would recognize you, of course, from your almost 2 decades at the helmet of Havas Sports and Entertainment, part of the large Havas advertising and media group, or part even of Vivendi. That might not even might know that part. But you have been around the block a lot longer than that, not just what you've done there. You have a really interesting career, starting all the way at the very beginning with America's Cup there. And of course, a lot of very interesting things you've done really over the last couple of years here, which we're going to be diving deep into over the next hour here. So, like I said, you are, I think, someone who's fairly well known in the industry, so I won't go into too much of intro here, and I'd rather go straight in and start digging around your amazing career and stories here. And what I'd love to start off with, and again, this is sort of the fun part when I really do some homework and study, of course. Even though we've been friends for a long time, I don't think I ever knew your history on the America's Cup and even what you did in Formula One there in the early days. So I'd love to hear that part, how it all started as a young Frenchman there coming out of university and getting involved in the French Challenger boat for the America's Cup.
Well, yes, that's fantastic memories. Actually, it's
a long
all
time
started
ago, huh?
Yes, actually, I don't feel that old when I remember that, because I feel like I would certainly do the same today. And I've always been passionate about what I'm doing. So I keep on keeping the same passion. But yeah, long time ago, I was a student with ESSEC Business School, and France at that time was a socialist country. We had François Mitterrand had just been elected a couple of years before, and our economy was not great. So the franc went down from, I remember it was something like 4 francs a dollar to 10 francs a dollar.
Oh, wow.
So the guys who have planned the French Challenge, the America's Cup, actually, if you want a little bit of history here, we have a very famous figure in France, Baron Bic, who invented the Bic pens. And he was the one who founded the America's Cup in the early days of the French participation. Okay. But he did not follow on. So somebody took took his legacy, but he didn't have enough money. So he had to find a way, and he reached out to students, funnily enough, to try to have youngsters trying to raise money in the Anglo-Saxon way, which was not very usual in France at that time. And I was passionate enough to really take a lot of my time to raise money for that bid, who desperately need to fill the gap. And this is the way I won that. I think I raised something like $200,000 at that time, but for a student was not bad. And I was then elected the most valuable player, and I was invited to go and just attend the America's Cup in Newport. But I negotiated against that an internship, and I spent 6 months helping the team to really prepare for the event. And during the summer, I went there, I was 19, I was part of the team, and my job was to raise money every morning by selling T-shirts that had been made overnight in the shop, in the souvenir shop. And I took the money from the day every evening to give it to the cook so he could buy the meal for the team. That's the kind of short circle. And in those days, you saw the impact you had raising money for the team, because it was absolutely a survival kit.
Wow. What a great way to get into the industry as well. I love that. That's definitely a new one. I've never heard this one. That beats some of the others who, started off as interns and others. So that I love that. What a great way. So you had then it was sort of, I guess, here I can see it was about 2 years or so.
And then it was Yes, well, 6 months, but it was not in 1985. It was in '83 when the Australian beat the American for the first time. You know, the America's Cup has been kept by the Americans for 132 years until that day, and so it was a big thing, and it was a major media blow. And I was there in Newport when the Aussies won, and for me, it was I realized how sport could be impactful, because everybody I knew around the world knew about that event, and of course there was no internet, there was nothing, but I realized talking with people how impactful this event was, and from one location you can really reach out to the world. And what I realized as well is that even if our French team was quite amateur, the Anglo-Saxon team were very professional. The American, the Australian who won, the Canadian, the English, they all had professional marketers. And I realized that learning marketing at school, I could also align it with my passion for sports. And this was the very beginning of my direction of travel. I realized that could be a business for me, which before that moment, I had no idea. I just came to have fun with the America's Cup. I had no idea that could be a real career.
There's a business behind it, right? Yeah, I love that. That's a great story. That's a great warm-up. So I kind of skip a little bit over your year there in Saatchi, unless there's anything interesting there. But I wanted to touch on I'm not sure I pronounce it properly, the Larousse Lamborghini Formula One team, where you spent, again, a couple of years there. We're still in the sort of later 80s now here. How did that happen? You know, how did you sort of ended up in that role?
Yeah, well, very simply, I was with Saatchi & Saatchi. I tried to find a sports marketing job in France coming back from Australia, because the long story short is, after the America's Cup was won by the Australian, I went to Australia, spent 2 years, because I thought that this was a new frontier for me. And that's when the America's Cup was held in Australia, and I learned a lot because I worked around that field. And also I attended the first Rugby World Cup 1987, when France went in semi-final. I was one of the few Frenchmen against the 15,000 Aussies, and France won. So it's a great memory as a fan. But long story, come back to France, find a job at Saatchi & Saatchi, and learn the basic of marketing. But I realized that the whole efforts we made, and this is very interesting, the insights, the planning, the strategic planning, everything, at the end of the day, you have a 30-minute commercial. And all the work you do is just for 30-minute commercial, which in fact is a commercial break. So it's a moment where you break the program. And what happened was, I worked very hard on TVC. Actually, it was produced with the help of a very famous director from Los Angeles, and we had this video conference. It was very expensive to make, the choice of the spoon that would be on the pack shot, and all this work. I think it was costing something like $10,000 to just have the uplink satellite video conference, just for a pre-production meeting to choose the spoon that would go on the top of the lid of the yogurt pot. That was a commercial Danone, and that will be seen for 1 second. And so I come back home, and then what I do is I watch a football match where Juventus Turin was playing with Danone on the shirt, and I realized that my client had no idea that there was a TV broadcasting for 90 minutes his brand on the face of a jersey of a premium team, because that was a local decision in Italy, and the global brand director had no idea. And that 90 minutes of engagement really stroked my imagination. And I was thinking, okay, all the story I tried to say in 30 minutes, in a 30 seconds, which is going to be aired at halftime. I'm not going to see it because I'm going to have a break myself. And there is no way I can engage as much as I do when I, as a fan, watch the team playing with the Danone brand on. Why don't we tell the story of advertising in the program instead of breaking the program and having this kind of bubble of advertising? So next day I went to my boss at Saatchi and said that, and he said, well, great idea, but how do you make money out of that idea? and I must say I was like 22. I had no idea about the business model. So that's where I thought I need to go and understand and learn. And that's when I quit Saatchi and joined the Formula One team that hired me, because I thought that it was the most mature and the most developed shape of sports marketing at that very early days in the 80s. And that's the way I really chose this experience to really learn. And I did learn very much over the 3 first seasons of Formula One when I joined this team. It was a very small team, actually. We didn't have much money, but my job was to raise money. Actually, I raised much more than the early days with the America's Cup. We went from 20 million to 70 million to 120 million the third year.
Wow.
That's French francs at the time, so it's quite big growth.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic team driven by race director Gérard Larousse, and with a great bunch of drivers, French drivers, very talented, but also a Japanese one, Aguri Suzuki. And the team went from nowhere to its first podium. That was my last Grand Prix in 1990. First podium in Suzuka. But what we learned is that because we had no chance to really be seen on TV at that time, you could see only the Ferraris and the McLarens. The only way for us to justify the sponsorship dollars that we got was to create amazing activations. And that's where I started to have a lot of ideas on how to tell stories about brands that sponsor Formula One, instead of just trying to have a big exposure of their logos on the body of the Formula One racing cars. I tried to tell stories and to create content. So it was a very, very early form of branded content and content marketing.
I love that. Yeah, I can see how that is shaping, also knowing what you've obviously done at Havas and for so many years, how some of those early stories which you're now sharing, how that all shaped what you were doing after. It was really cool. I have to admit, I never really realized that Lamborghini ever was an F1. So that was a partnership with the owner, I guess, right? Who was he still driving at the same time as well, or how did it work?
It was very serious at that time. Actually, Lamborghini has been acquired by Chrysler. And at that time, Lee Iacocca was the CEO of Chrysler. And that was a very important strategy to, try to match with Ferrari. And they hired Ferrari's chief engineer, Mauro Ferrugieri, to lead the Formula One V12 amazing new engine that they created. So that was a very first. They tried their best. The problem was that it was I would say not reliable at all. So the first Grand Prix we used the Lamborghini. The car actually was very fast, and we had very fast drivers, so we could qualify quite high on the grid. But the problem was that it was not reliable at all. So the first Grand Prix,
last.
No, it didn't start. So we all the cars, they started, and ours was just stuck, and we had to push with the mechanics. You could still do that after all the pack started. So it was not a very glorious beginning. And yes, actually, the engine never lasts very long. So we never had a very great season with the Lamborghini. Actually, they did only one season. And then they stopped.
Oh, right.
Then they
Okay.
stopped.
Okay. Yeah.
It was just a try and a failure, but a big learning for everyone.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, look, I have to admit, this was a bit before F1 really showed up on my radar. So clearly I don't know some of that history there. I love it.
At that time, it was really pro-Senna, the big battle.
Correct.
Senna.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, then obviously, coming out of that, the experience you had there for several years, it appears to me you set up your own agency, right? Lifestyle Marketing Group.
Well, actually, it was not my own. I was a partner in it. I was the entrepreneur, but I was backed by LMG in the US. Okay. And as you interviewed recently, Claude Ribol, he was the one who offered me to start the French branch of that US Saatchi-owned company. Actually, I kept a good relationship with Saatchi and Saatchi, and when they decided to actually Robert Louis-Dreyfus, the former and he's been the owner of Adidas.
Adidas, yes, absolutely. Yes.
But at that time, he was the CEO of Saatchi and Saatchi, and he believed in sports, so he developed this US company. And as I had this idea, and I pitched it to the chairman of Saatchi and Saatchi France before I left to Formula One.
Right.
Then, when he realized that they had this in mind for the US, he said to Claude, who was in charge in the US, "Why don't you go and meet Lucien? He's in Formula One, but he's the kind of guy who could do that for us." So it was kind of a startup incubated by Saatchi and Saatchi.
Got it. Okay, well, that's a nice way. That always helps if you have a little bit of firepower behind it. And so, what was lifestyle marketing can mean anything. What is it really? What you were focusing on?
The idea was really to leverage the passion of people to really help brands to activate sponsorship beyond the traditional awareness and even hospitality. Even sales promotion using sport was very minor at that time. So what we tried to do was to help brand to strategize. And my experience with the more traditional, let's say, more traditional marketing platform with advertising helped me to adapt to sports what we could have called sports planning. And we tried to build our recommendation on insights and measurements and trying to have some elements that will help not to just choose tactical projects, but give more tangible, rational reasons for brand to invest in the longer term and with a more ambitious thing. So what happened was, it was in 91 and the Olympic Games were coming to Europe. Albertville 92 for the Winter Games, and then Barcelona 92. At that time, you remember the Olympics were being the same year, winter and summer. It was the last time, actually. So 92 was a very symbolic year for Europe because Europe was opening its borders. It was the first time the European market was really tangible for European citizens. And Europe wanted to take advantage of the Olympic Games being hosted by two European countries Europe.
Barcelona, right, at the same time. That's right.
Yes, exactly. And so we actually pitched a very big business opportunity from the European community who wanted to use sports as a way to engage citizens. So it was quite an interesting communication strategy, and we won that on the principle that we would not spend, because they decided to put 10 to 12 million euros. It was EQs at that time, but it was euros, to support the two organizing committee. And our strategy was not to say, okay, you have spent that, so now we will have a big advertising campaign to say to the world that you've done that. We said, look, if you have that, we could use it as a lever to negotiate with the OCOG, the Albertville Olympic Committee organization, and Barcelona on how Europe can be seen as a sponsor. So so that was a strategy of brand content, using the European flag as one of the brand being seen. And actually, as it was not a brand, you could match with the clean stadium policy of the Olympic Games. So actually, we negotiated the Olympic flag to be seen during the ceremonies, part of the show. So, for example, the Barcelona stadium was lit by a tifo with light sticks that there was no LED at that time, but light stick that you could break, and it was in your hands as a spectator, and the whole stadium was lit with the 12 golden stars on a blue background all around the stadium. And that was a negotiation we had against this sponsorship, and the rest was very much about how to put the European story within the athletes' village, within the Olympic site. A lot of content that was also produced and that was toured around Europe with a truck that told a story with a flame. So it was very early days, but it was really a 360 platform. And that was the very beginning of the LMG roster of clients, because that started, like, we opened the shop in March 91, and the pitch was in April, and we won it in May. Wow. So from that moment, the Olympic Games was a year after. So we started with 2 people, and in July we were already 15, and a year later we were 25. So it was very speed. But again,
that's incredible. I love it.
The big events always helped me to lift it, because the next step was the 98 World Cup in France, where after a slow beginning, because even 92 was opening the eyes of marketers, but not as much as it did in other countries. 98 was the moment where really people realized that the power of sports to drive marketing was really big. With the World Cup, and especially France
winning it.
So that was the second step. So my LMG story was really between the 92 and the 98, which helped us to really be much more credible in terms of an agency, not just a specialist of sports.
Right. And how much was let's say, you were leaning on Saatchi for certain things, or was it really you guys are running out there mostly on your own? How would you describe that?
Actually, it was this integration was a failure. It didn't work out. Actually, Robert Louis Dreyfus left Saatchi very quickly after I did this deal with LMG, and he acquired Adidas from the Dassler family. Yes. And so with him, the drive of sports left the company as well. And they decided that, and actually it was not a great moment for Saatchi and Saatchi. The 2 brothers they also left. So after having been really at the top, Saatchi was getting headwinds. So they were focusing on trying to solve their own problems. So the diversification that I was driving was not of interest. So I had to do it on my own.
Yeah, you were left alone a bit, but I get it.
Exactly. And so we run our own client list. We got to the market on our own, and there was no much synergy. So that's the reason why actually I took over and I bought it out from Saatchi. I had only 15%, so I bought out the remaining 85% and became independent just before the Soccer World Cup. And after the Soccer World Cup, as we demonstrated that we could be really a strong player in that field, we got 4 out of the 8 sponsors of the French committee, including Hewlett-Packard out of the US and Manpower, but also Crédit Agricole. We started to work with Coca-Cola at that time as well. So that made us a quite attractive independent agency. And what we could not do with Saatchi and Saatchi, I thought that maybe we could do it with Havas, and that's where we joined Havas a little bit later, because that was the idea of having a powerhouse and especially a global network. Because the thing of us being independent in France at that moment was we didn't have enough, strength to pitch for really global businesses. Right. And I realized working with HP on the World Cup 98 that was the most difficult part of our relationship, because they were really keen to have people
with a bigger network
work well, but they wanted the big network. Exactly. So we had to compromise a lot, whereas with a bigger network it was much easier.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Now, before we move into a bit more of the Havas side of the story here, so at the end, before you, and you can, was it a merger, an acquisition, or exactly, maybe we'll talk about that as well, but how large was the agency at that time? How many people, and maybe if you have a rough number of turnover or whatever the way you would measure it?
Well, actually, yes. When I sold LMG to Havas, we were having a turnover about 30 million euros with about 35 people.
Right.
And that was so actually what happened was we sold 51% of the company and we kept 49% for a while. And those early days with Havas didn't work out very well. We actually didn't know what would happen, and what happened was they wanted to play big, which was good, but what they did was they acquired the ISL France branch, because it is exactly the moment where an ISL went
started to have problems.
Exactly. And so Havas decided to buy ISL France, but ISL France was in fact not very well structured. They tried to compete against Jean-Claude Darmon at the time, the founder of Sport5, who ran, let's say, 2/3 of the French football club. And so they had decided to manage the rights of the other third, but obviously it was not the best one, the best third. And they put down a lot of money as upfront minimum guarantees. And we had to integrate this business in our consulting, because my business was much more consulting driven. So long story short, at the beginning, when we merged the company, 80% came from ISL and the kind of marketing branch. 20% was the consulting and activation branch. And after 4 years, the 20% became 80% and the 80% became 20%. And so I multiplied by 4 my business, but their side of the business became really, really less and less profitable. So when I say it was not great, it's because it was a hard work to, grow. But at the end of the day, you couldn't see it because the whole thing was still at the same level. So we were under the big pressure of the group to deliver better. I did my best, but I couldn't do more. So that's the moment where I took over the whole company, because during that moment I was just in charge of the consulting part, and I had to cope with a different kind of management. So when we were freed from that, and that's the beginning of 2004, we started to be much better off. And something happened then, which was very important for me, which was the takeover of Havas by Vincent Bolloré, because in that first 4 years, I couldn't expand the network as I would have loved, because I had to cope with the problems in France. So it was a little bit like a missed opportunity. So I was almost on my way out when Bolloré came, and he actually was not a sports fan at all, but he understood what we tried to do. He was very interested in the concept of this kind of agency, which was obviously quite different from the bulk of the industry. And he kind of gave me his support. And with his support, I could then start the global expansion that I've loved to do. And so that started only in 2005 afterwards. And that's when Havas Sports Entertainment became really what I wanted it to be after those early days within Havas, which didn't work very well.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's a lot of similarities here. Now, you obviously then grew it. Again, some of the numbers I've seen here, 600 people, 30 countries. I don't know whether that's 30 offices or that's where you were operating sort of within 30 countries. I mean, that's a large number and that's a lot of people. That is over how many years, from the time you just talking about?
We grew it from 2006 to 2006. We opened the first international branches in Spain and in the UK, but actually and in China. Sorry, because we wanted to be ready for the Olympic Games, and then we expanded it over the course of 6 years. So it was quite a fast growth. Actually, most of those were startups. Some of them were acquisitions, especially in the UK and in the US. So, but we really had 20. Yes, we had 30 agencies out of 25 countries. What we did also is, in some countries, we hired people from the Havas agencies, and spin off some of the businesses to create proper agencies named Havas Sports Entertainment. So in some countries, we were able to benefit from the footprint of the group. It was always a help anyway, because they help in the admin and financial part of it. Yeah. So that was a big help. But from an operational side, we really had to win every single client. And the way we did it fast was to have a global team working with me centrally. And what we did with this global team is we kind of, as a task force, went to every new country as soon as we have found the right manager to start it up, and help him or her to win its first clients for the first 6 months, I would say. Right. And giving him all the tools, methodologies, templates, but also working with some of our clients to open new markets. And one of them, which has been absolutely central for us, was Coca-Cola, because we managed to be really close to their global HQ in Atlanta, and we work very well with their France activities, of course. But step by step, what we did was, learning from the brand in France and in the US, we could give tips to the local team to pitch for a piece of the business. And after a few years, I would say, we had something like 5 or 6 countries running Coca-Cola campaigns. So we started to be really recognized by Coke as an agency of reference. And that helped us to win businesses across 25 countries. So we had local Coca-Cola business across 25 countries. And we were helped also by the global at Coke, who thought it was a good way for them to also educate and help their local teams. So that was a real driver for our growth. And of course, Coke is always a great brand to have when you start in a country, because people would believe they have chosen people who know what they talk about.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Coca-Cola is a tremendous reference. Now, what I wanted to talk a little bit about as well, and because I do remember now coming back to me some of our earlier conversations, and I think we probably connected first time around 2010, maybe, where we actually had a partnership for a while. I remember working with a couple of your guys there. Great, as I said, you had a really good team there, especially obviously certain things in Asia, etc. And obviously, but you did, as you mentioned, you did acquire quite a few companies around the world as well. Maybe just one or two sort of bigger ones, or anyone would recognize of the ones you guys bought and then integrated into the business.
Well, yes. Well, what I can mention, because that was a big success and actually it's linked with Coca-Cola, is a company called Ignition. Mm-hmm. They were a family-owned business based in Atlanta, and what they did was they started with Coke back in '96 with the Olympic torch relay. Mm-hmm. And they run experiential capabilities, and they were really able to help Coke to implement the activation of their bigger rights. And they started with the Olympic torch relay. So it was really every Olympic Games, they plan how to bring the torch everywhere in the world and activating the Coke system. Mm-hmm. And then they won the FIFA World Cup Trophy Tour. So they also had this very important platform built for Coke, where the FIFA World Cup Trophy Tour was traveling in a plane to every country, or even more countries that participated in the World Cup, so they could extend the activation to the world. And that was at each step a big event for the local community of fan soccer fans, and having the World Cup with the FIFA ambassadors and so forth. Yeah. So this company was run from Atlanta with more or less 50 people, and we acquired it, integrated into Havas Sports Entertainment, and that was our let's say way to also pitch for bigger business. They had a branch in the UK that we merged with another acquisition we made, Cake Entertainment. Yes. Was one of the leader in brand entertainment. Yeah. I don't know if you remember them. Yeah. They were really very savvy in the way creative group music. Mm. Yeah. So we, with that in our hands, were able to really grow our capabilities, and then we went also to expand this skill set across the different agencies we had in different countries.
Yeah, because I think you started off as Havas Sports, and then the entertainment part came a bit later, right? That was.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Well, when I joined Havas, I was really I've already done a lot of things in entertainment before that, but when I joined Havas, there was really the focus on sports. When actually the digital component came at play, and I think this is the first internet burst, like the end of 90s, beginning of 2000. Yeah. It was clear that content was a driver, and in content, I knew that from video gaming to music and video footage, we could play with the internet. So that's where we realized that was a great thing to also learn and know better about the entertainment world and bring it back to the core of our business. And actually, in 2002, one of the big things we did for Coke, and I think one of the things I really liked, was in fact, they had these rights to play the game, to have a game just before the official game started at the FIFA World Cup. They did that in France, actually, with young kids who play the game in the stadium.
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Yes. But they couldn't do that in Asia, because in Japan and in Korea it was too wet, and the pitch would have been ruined by the kids. Okay. Before the game. So we had to find a solution, and that's where we decided to have a virtual World Cup with the first ever deal with EA Sports and the FIFA game. Right. And so we had young kids playing FIFA game on big screens during the preliminary stage, the warm-up of the real game. And that was the first time that was organized as at a global level, a kind of an e-sport contest. And we also had the brand Coca-Cola embedded into the game. That was the first time that there was a kind of a in-game advertising. So that was back in 2002. So that also opened our eyes about the fact that we had to be much more hybrid and not just treat sports as a silo, but as one of these entertainment space where many elements could be mixed and leveraged.
Yeah, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong here. The way I would describe Havas Sports Entertainment is really, you guys are an activation and execution agency, right? You help brands who've already, let's say, made a commitment. Maybe in some cases you probably help brands also before they made the commitment, right? I'm sure you did probably. You help them figure out whether they should be in the sports, but you were not really in the selling space, right? Or did you ever really sell rights as well?
No, we were in the buying space. we did not sell, but we bought. And we spent quite a lot of efforts to help brands to, acquire the assets, evaluate, and have some rationale. But we did a lot of negotiation with the likes of the IOC, FIFA, and the America's Cup, and many others, the different leagues, on behalf of our clients. We were not just
on the client side. Correct.
Yeah, correct. But also offering some new concept. I just want to have one example here is Louis Vuitton. Mm-hmm. They were not in sports apart from the America's Cup. I knew them for a long time because they were already there. That was their first year with the America's Cup in 1983 when I started. But then they became my client for many years with the Louis Vuitton Cup and the partnership. But that, for them, it was just the world of the America's Cup that fits with the Louis Vuitton. They didn't think about that as a sport. And what we managed to do was to think about, okay, now that sport is universal, now that it became much more upmarket, now that Louis Vuitton is sold to the world, your clients are the ones who are attending the final of the football FIFA World Cup. And you should really not forget that you need to get closer to your clients. So that's when we negotiated with FIFA the possibility for Louis Vuitton not to have a traditional package of sponsors, but create a new asset, which was this trophy case. And that was for the FIFA World Cup 2010 in South Africa. And we had for the first time the FIFA World Cup that was packed in a travel case, a Louis Vuitton travel case, presented just before the kickoff of the match. And we had a beautiful model dressed in a Louis Vuitton dress, showing it with the former skipper of the winning team was the one who presented.
I remember that well, and again, like you said, I mean, first of all, the whole world is watching at that time, right? You have, I don't know, hundreds of millions of people around the world watching there on their TV. Great moment for Louis Vuitton, and it fits so well, right? Having a suitcase, and of course Louis Vuitton has gone beyond that now, right? They've done a deal. Is it with League of Legends as well, where the trophy is now runs around in the suitcase too, or correct, right?
Yes, exactly, and it's actually has been broken by Havas, and my former teams are still there, so I'm quite proud of that. And actually,
that's cool.
This is it's not limited to just two things. In the meantime, they had also struck deals with the Ryder Cup, with the French Open, with many others, because the concept has been expanded. But what I wanted to say is that our insights and strategy sometimes created special relationship with stakeholders, which was not about selling their assets, but buying them, or sometimes offering new ways to connect brands. So we had a lot of work. I've worked a lot with many of the right holders, but in a different way than the traditional selling activities.
Interesting. So I'm assuming, and I think you kind of alluded to it earlier. So they bought 51%, but I'm assuming there was an earn-out. So over a period of time, they Havas owned everything, right? And you were, is that how it sort of ended up? Eventually, that they bought the whole thing.
When I mentioned the difficult time in the beginning to bring together the different companies into one bigger company. So at that moment, we had to find a deal to really mitigate some of the things. So after a few years, I was not shareholder anymore, and I became an entrepreneur. Nice. So that's when Bolloré came. I was just it was not my company anymore. It was really Havas who owned it, but I kind of had the freedom to grow it and to manage it as a standalone network. So it was really a great time, even if it was not exactly as if I had created my own asset.
No, I love it. And again, I mean, anyone in the industry been long enough around would have come across Havas Sports Entertainment in one form or shape. But you guys were all over the world, and you worked at the biggest events, from the FIFA World Cups to I think you did work with the NBA and NFL and Premier League. So I'm sure you had many touch points there. And again, we probably could talk the entire podcast just on Havas because it is such a big agency. But we do have a few other things I wanted to cover because there's a lot more interesting part to it. So I kind of want to move on unless there's any last sort of really amazing one which you feel you wanted to share as a story of something you guys did. Otherwise, I want to start talking a bit about Vivendi here.
Well, one word, I just we were close to the French Olympic efforts for the bids, and we lost many times.
Okay.
So one of the loss was preceded by a great victory or great event. We organized an amazing event on the Champs-Élysées that really struck the imagination of the world a month before the Singapore vote. And at that time, Paris became an Olympic city, and we had a giant track, athletic track on the Champs-Élysées. You remember that? So that was something I was really proud of, because we thought we did all what we could do, but it was just France. And that was in 2005. And that's when in Singapore, we were obviously beaten by a much stronger, much more organized and much better influential competitor, the UK. And I realized that, in fact, France will never win if there was no better organized, influential network around the world. So that loss in 2005 was really, for me, it was a kind of epiphany about the fact that I needed to create a network that would really help the France influence in sports to grow in the world. And so I think that if we have won the Olympic Games for 2012, maybe I would have stayed in France and kept the agency as a domestic one, because we would have been very busy with the Olympic Games. The fact that we lost was for me a great chance. And actually, the Olympic Games in 2012 was a great inspiration for me. I realized how London was the center of the world. So I moved to London, and I spent the next 6 years in London and working with my British colleagues and friends over there, and also learning a lot from this very dynamic and a fantastic city. I loved being in London. I was very depressed because I was there as well when they voted Brexit and all the rest of it. But when we came, and that's the last thing I wanted to say about this moment, I was very proud of what we did at that time, because honestly, Havas was known, but it was not a big agency in the eyes of the Brits. They had their own marketplace. But there was this big bid organized by Barclays, the Barclays Premier League at that time. And David Weldon, who is an iconic CMO, was the CMO of Barclays at that moment. And he had organized this with 20 contenders. And we were, I think, the 19th on their list of invitees. And we won this one, and we became the agency of record for Barclays. They had
for their activation
6 agencies. They wanted to have only one. So it was a great moment for me, and we brought a lot of our ideas about content and strategy to that market. So it was.
And the activation was in the UK or worldwide, or what was the role you guys were playing?
Was worldwide, but that it was mainly in the UK, because the Premier League. But our remit was global. But the most important element for them was in the UK, and the relationship with the Premier League and the content and everything.
Right. Yeah, and again, we can spend another hour on that. I'm sure there's some great stuff about how Barclays obviously used the Premier League globally, and how it really became synonymous there. But as that we won't have all that time right now. We'll save that for another day. Now, again, not everyone knows that Havas obviously is owned by the larger Vivendi group, which encompasses many other parts of the puzzle. Universal Music, Canal Plus, in the gaming world, they own Gameloft, and I believe some parts of Ubisoft as well, if I read that correctly, and a few other things. So, how did you then, transition from, let's say, a part of the group into the larger group as then the chief marketing officer and also the CEO of Copyrights Group? How did that sort of come about?
Well, while at Havas, actually, Vincent Bolloré was the main shareholder of Havas, and his son Yannick Bolloré is the current chairman and CEO, actually, and he has worked. I've worked a lot with him as well, and they were interested in media, investing in media. The Bolloré Group is a very strong group with a lot of capital, so they were interested to expand the Havas remit to a bigger part of the ecosystem. And in fact, having worked a lot on sports and entertainment, having also won quite a significant international new business, pioneering innovative solutions in branded content, in experiential marketing, in elements that really play with those stakeholders. And that was the way for us to, let's say, get a sense of how powerful this industry could be. So when Bolloré decided to take over Vivendi, he gathered a small task force with him, including his son Yannick, Dominique Delport, who was the head of media at that moment, and me, and a couple of others, to help him to look into Vivendi assets and see what could be done in order to unlock the potential of that company that was at that moment a little bit diverse and less centered around entertainment. There was also technology, there was telco as well. So I participated in the task force, and that is something I did in parallel with my job at Havas. But step by step, it became obvious that he needed somebody with him full time. And so he asked me to transition from Havas to Vivendi, and actually Vivendi took over Havas a few months later. So it was like I was like one of the pioneer of the Havas era of Vivendi. But now Havas is completely integrated in Vivendi anyway. So yes, it was a very different role for me because, as I said, I was an entrepreneur and I run a small group of people around the world. So it was very agile, very light in a way. Even 600 people. It was not 600 people in a blow. It was people. In small, let's say the biggest agency was maybe France with 120 people, but the rest was really 30 people, 20 people, 15 people. Here, we are talking about a 43,000 people group, and I've been appointed as a CMO of the group. So my job was really to try to bring together the different parts of the group in a more integrated manner. So the marketing integration of Vivendi main division, Universal Music Group, Canal Plus Group, Havas, Gameloft, Vivendi Village, Dailymotion, was all about trying to streamline brand marketing organizations, setting up coordination processes and teams, mutualizing consumer data and intelligence. And so this was very much, it was very different. The only thing that I tried to bring with me from my experience was more to work on proof of concept and have very practical operations to bring people together instead of, having consulting firms like the BCG or PwC of this world, re-engineering the whole structure. The idea was more to learn by doing and test, and if we failed, we fix, and if we succeeded, then we could motivate people to follow the path. But it was very much this kind of approach. So even if the overall company was very different, my role was still to pitch people, to convince them as they would be my clients. Actually, they were my colleagues, but it was more internal, but still quite a lot of marketing work. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because that was sort of just listening to you, you're thinking, where do you even start with a company like this, right? I mean, there's so many facets to it and very different pieces to the puzzle, right? From music to games to, to a TV channel. I mean, how on earth where do you even start there? I mean, you just ended up running around and meeting everyone first and then figuring out which direction everyone is running, or how did you even start there?
Well, that's one of the things you have to do. You have to meet people. Well, the good thing is that I was close to the head, so it opened a lot of doors. So I met the top guys very quickly and their key teams. But trying to do something more practical. Actually, there was one thing that that struck my imagination it was a very much a B2C group, but they had no, apart from Havas, obviously, there are no B2B business. Music, movie production, gaming, all that was very much, everyone was dealing with their own consumers. And I realized that in my experience, when we had a client, the client was very strict on us delivering the right approach with kind of when we worked together with Havas and we were different agencies pitching for the same clients, we had to align our slides. We had to have the same slide to address the same client. So I tried to do the same using a third party to bring people to the same alignments. So we started the Vivendi for Brands concept, starting discussion with the likes of Red Bull or Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. So I had those meetings with Red Bull or Coke, meeting every single part of the group, and people realized that they were asking the same questions. So answering to the same questions meant that we started to find the commonalities in the different approaches, the way people could give some proper assets like insights, data, consumer analysis. So we started to have some kind of a common language. And that helped a lot to bring all those different way of doing it to the same pattern, to the same template. So using a third party is always something helpful within a group where people feel very independent from each other, which is quite relevant because they all know very well their market. But in fact, at the end of the day, if you have to present to somebody who have their own vision, then it's better. And the second thing, of course, is to be thinking about the synergies and how we could create a better use of everybody's experience for the others. So that's why we also, on the B2C side, thought that the proof of concept we could have was to have one single IP that could be played by everyone. So everyone would have their own field of play, but at the core, there was the same IP. And that drove the acquisition of Paddington as our kind of proof of concept for the B2C element. So with this, we could use this IP as the starting point of the value chain. So from the design and story writing to then the production of different type of content. So TV series, box office movie production, gaming, music, soundtrack, and music festival, musical, and licensing products as well. And all those elements with the same point of entry, which was the same character and the same story around that character, helped everyone to also meet the same kind of deadlines, because we tried to coordinate and synchronize the go-to market of those different products, those different content, so we could have a campaign. So the inspiration is Disney. They invented that back in the 1930s. I'm always so impressed by the vision of Walt Disney when he drove what actually connection between all the assets of his empire was already efficient during the early days. But now on the same template, you can exactly draw the same map and have all your divisions working together. And I think that what maybe Disney is becoming too big now to do that, but we were small enough with Vivendi to bring everyone together and really try to do something like that. We also had
sorry, let me jump in for a second, because I want to make sure when you say Paddington, let's spell actually out what it is, because I'm not sure everyone knows them, right? So this is the Paddington bear, right? Am I correct?
It's the Paddington bear.
And anyone who's ever been to the UK, you see this of course all over the place in souvenir shops and other places. Now, I have to admit, I don't know how big it is anywhere else in the world, whether it's France or the rest of the world. So I had two questions here. One is, who owned it? Who was who actually owned the license or the IP of Paddington Bear? Where does it originate from? I'm assuming from the UK, but
it was created by a British man who sadly died a couple of years ago at age 93, but he created Paddington. His name is Michael Bond, and he created Paddington back in the 50s. Right, okay. And he was a book writer. And Paddington started as a bestseller for kids, and he wrote 15 books where he told the story of this young Peruvian bear that was an immigrant in London and became more British than any British.
Okay.
he doesn't exactly know what he does, so he's learning all the time, and he's learning, but he's somebody who is really kind and good. So the values of Paddington are very positive.
Right.
But he's been cheered by kids all over the world. It's very Anglo-Saxon in the first place. But what we did was we hired. So to answer your question, so Michael Bourne had his own family business, and he sold us the IP. So we bought the IP, but the books. But so we bought every element of the IP, from filmmaking to licensing to everything with the character, but the books that are still in his family.
Right. Got it. Okay. So interesting. Okay. Now again, Vivendi is very French. Let's put it this way, right? It's a very big, strong French company, and you're buying a British IP. How does that work? So to use that as a case study.
Vivendi is not that French. The largest asset of Vivendi is Universal Music Group. It is driven from by a British guy, Sir Lucien Boyer from Santa Monica. So the group is very global. Right. But you're right. It was strange for many people that it was a French-owned company that believed in the British icon, especially in the time of the Brexit. But no, what we thought it was one of the very few IP that was not a Disney IP, that was not owned by the other majors, the Warner and Sony, right. And that we could help thrive. We felt very close to the British culture. Actually, it's more for us. It's more European. What we tried to do was to have a kind of an alternative to the American culture from Europe, and we believe that Paddington is very European in its heart and it's in its DNA. So that's why we were really interested by Paddington, and also we thought that we could help Paddington to thrive because we had the proper skill set. So the first step was a popular movie, and we hired David Heyman, the Harry Potter producer. So he's a genius in creating a world from a book. Yes. He has proven it with the Harry Potter saga, and David Heyman helped us to create an amazing film. Actually, we produced 2 films with him, and he also hired the high-tech visual effects frame store, so the character become a CP computer generated image, a CGI. But this made Paddington accessible to the rest of the world. And with Studio Canal international footprint, we were able to sell the film very well in Asia, in China and Japan especially, but also in Latin America, in the rest of Europe, in Germany, in France, obviously, in Spain. So with our, let's say, distribution power with Studio Canal, we could really help Paddington to become much more popular than in the traditional Anglo-Saxon world. And from there, we leveraged that with a new deal with Nickelodeon to produce a TV series that has been launched after I left, actually, but that was in the making. So now it's also a character for kids in the Cartoon Network all over the world. So, and the last bit, which I should have quoted also, is Gameloft, who created a game. Gameloft are they are the producer of the Minions, for example, and this kind of Disney or Universal Studios iconic characters that are, on free game on mobile, especially. So we had the Paddington Run game that went very well as well, which helped also Paddington to be very accessible for the younger generation. So this whole character became very modern and very well marketed, and that, of course, attracted a lot of deals with brands and licenses around the world.
I love it. But before we move on, and because I really want to touch a bit on the couple other things you are doing right now as well, which I think is just great stuff, which I really want our listeners to hear. But I do, obviously, Vivendi was involved in the Olympic bid for Paris 2024, which then France finally won. So maybe that hardship which you had to go through with Havas, it finally came all through. Just a quick one on that. What was the involvement? Were you just a sponsor or partner of the local bid committee, or how far did the relationship go?
Well, my personal story means that I knew very, very well the leadership team. Tony Estanguet is a good friend. We worked together for many years. Etienne Taubois, the CEO, I've worked with him on the previous bid. So I was much closer than just a sponsor. I was responsible for Vivendi to bring our financial support, but not only. We mobilized Canal Plus. So my friend who worked with me for many years, Thierry Schellman, who is the sports director at Canal Plus, helped a lot with all the team, the journalists, to support the bid. We also mobilized our other branch. So Universal Music Group played a great role in bringing artists to support the bid, to create original soundtrack, to support the events as well. Gameloft created a game with Teddy Riner running the streets of Paris.
Yes, they went everywhere. Wow.
Yes, and we also had Dailymotion to support the bid with the video distribution. So actually we use it as a way also to bring together the group. That was another idea, more from an internal standpoint, because at that moment it was more something to bring all the team together, but also to help the bid to win.
Sure. That's a great rallying cry, right? If you can support the Olympics and, bring that across the whole company, I can see that, how that can bring people together and really bond. I like that part. Now, quick one on, so what do you think France did right, or Paris did right this time versus the other ones? Where do you see, if you look at it, is there one or two things which really made the difference this time?
Well, I think the leadership made a big difference. I think the leadership was driving it, not the politicians.
Okay.
What happened in the past was very much, people forgot in France that it was an international bid, that you had to talk to the IOC and the IOC members, that you had to convince the international federations, and that you had to play with the marketing tools around. And people were more in the internal traditional political battles where, the mayor of Paris is fighting the president, who's fighting the other representatives. So this time everybody aligned behind the leadership team, which was driven by our SEPCO, Tony Estanguet, and that made a huge difference. And I think that we had the full support and alignment of the political parties. I realized that there was no way France would do that if there was not an alignment. So the mayor of Paris and the French president, first of all Hollande and then Macron, because he just came in at the last moment. But what he did was very important. He came to Lausanne himself and really pitched for the event. And I think that there have been a great support from the whole France economy, and major brands really supported it. So I think that it's question also of maturation. Yeah. I think that the maturity of sports marketing in France is much higher now than it has never been. So that's why this bid was more prepared and could win. And even in the discussion with Los Angeles, because that was part of the win. I mean, if we would not have made a deal with Los Angeles, that would have been more complicated. Right. I think that it was a sign of maturity and cleverness from both sides. And actually, just for the record, but it's interesting to know that Universal Music Group was a sponsor of Los Angeles 28. So from my position, I was also in a position to connect the dots in a way, and had informal discussions with LA to make sure that it could work for both sides, and it does work. So it's quite interesting. So Vivendi was supporting Paris, and Universal Music was supporting in the US, Los Angeles. So for us, it was really good that the two parties became really organized and work together.
Love it. And I'm fingers crossed in 2024 the world is a little more back to normal, and we can have an Olympics rather than what's obviously currently happening here in Tokyo. And I don't want to go there right now because I still want to touch on a few other things here, as much as that it is an obvious segue into talking a bit about what we're expecting here this year, but none of us knows. So I think it's the usual guesswork there. So, what I've seen here really, again, looking at your LinkedIn profile, is that, I would say then in the last couple of years, you've really gotten involved in a host of other things, right? So I think, after maybe you moved into Vivendi, maybe there was a bit of extra spare time there to also go into things which, maybe you had a passion for or you saw some new opportunities. And I just want to, touch on a couple here. I mean, one is, of course, I'm not sure if I pronounce it properly, Sponsora, I guess, which is sort of a French organization for sports experts and marketing, etc. But that's more of an organization, I guess, where you're a member and you're participating. But you've also launched the Global Sports Week. And, again, recently, or let's say early last year, you got involved in the Inspiring Sports Capital, and I'll leave the last one for later, where you just joined as chairman. Let's talk about Sports Weeks and Inspiring Sports Capital. Tell us a bit about, both of those, how it started and how it all links to everything we've already heard here over your last 30 years in the industry.
Well, actually, yes, it's linked with my my experience. I've met so many people around the world and so many different type of people involved in sports. I realized that somehow a lot of those people knew each other, but not all of them. There were some silos. The world of soccer on the one hand, the world of the Olympics on the other one, the world of Formula One, the America's Cup, the Asian part of the world, the European part, and also you had brands and real professionals of trading rights that were not really interacting. There had no reason to, because there was no place to do so. And I do attend a lot of those international forums that I like very much, and I admire a lot, like Sportel, Sportacor, SoccerX. Right. But some people are. You can see a few of us, and you are part of them, actually, Marcus, who are kind of going to each of them, but there are not so many people. Yep. Each of the time you find different type of people for the governance of sports, for the TV rights. So I realized that it was interesting to bring together all people that I met that have an influence on the future of sports, and also give sports a platform to have a more to be higher on the agenda of the other part of society and business. I tested this concept almost 10 years ago because we created Global Sports Forum in Barcelona. Actually, I did that with late Juan Antonio Samaranch Senior, when he wanted to find a legacy for Barcelona 92, and that drove the Global Sports Forum Barcelona as a kind of a place to bring people together and think about sports important issues at that time.
I remember that actually.
But when I left to London, I had no more time to do that, and it just disappeared. There was a change in the mayorship of Barcelona that went very Catalan, and they were less interested in a global event as well. So that was a great experience, and I realized that in a few years it has not been replaced by something else. There was the Doha goals for a while, but that was it was more local than global, I think, or more regional, I would say. So there was a space for something, and then Paris to host the Olympic Games. I thought that it was maybe the time for Paris to propose an annual rendezvous that could be inspirational, that could be influential, that could be helping business, bringing together the international sports ecosystem and society's leaders, and also a pitching stage for promising startups, because that's a new angle for sport with the sport tech world coming together. Right. So we pitched the idea to different people, and we got the high patronage of French President Macron, and with the support of institutions like UNESCO, but also international sporting organizations like UEFA, F1, FIBA and so forth, we realized that it was quite an interesting thing that people were expecting. So we put this together as a yearly rendezvous that is a little bit different from other platforms, as it is very horizontal and it's really looking forward. The idea is really to our motto is share, shake, and shape the future of sport.
Right.
And the idea is to let's say bring people together, but also challenge the status quo and have the younger generation. And we have the young sports makers, young people participating, and also challenging the speakers of more established organization live to really help looking forward and trying to identify the issues, but also find solutions, and do that in a quite business-minded way.
Interesting. Yeah, and I remember watching some of it. Now, I have to admit, Elmo, you started this in 2019 or 2020? When was the first one?
The first one was 2020.
2020,
it happened
okay.
just before the lockdown.
Right.
We brought 2,000 people coming from 70 countries in Paris, in the Louvre. Yes, it was in February a year ago, and that was the very first. So
yes, that's right. We met just slightly before that. That's why I remember I couldn't attend it, because I was just in Europe at that time. Now, we should mention, of course, that your next one is coming up, right? February 1st to 5th is round 2. Now, I'm assuming it's going to be a very digital affair. Talk a bit about it real quick.
Yeah, well, actually, what we did was when we realized that it was not possible to do a second edition as we did, impossible to bring people together right now, we decided to go where the people were, where the conversation is, where the future of sport is being made. And like Paris, there are 5 other cities that are going to host Olympic events. And when you have to host an Olympic event, you need to really think through new technology, new models, new solutions, being innovative, and also be bold. So that's why we decided to have not only one event, but to synchronize 6 events. Paris at the center, and that is going to be on the Eiffel Tower. So we go from the Louvre to the Eiffel Tower. It's going to be a big studio there to host our speakers. And they will have conversation with other panels held in Tokyo, Beijing, Los Angeles, Milan, and Dakar for the Youth Olympic Games. Wow. So we have those 6 cities connected to Paris through a big immersive digital platform that is going to help people following great speakers, discussions about major issues of sports, and of course discussion about the future of sports. Our topic is reinvention in action. The idea is really to not look backward, but look forward and try to find solutions for sports to bounce back. So it's all about how sports models can evolve, how the new generation will tell us about more relevant ways to bring people to sport, how to connect sports grassroots and professional sports, how to evolve in the digital world, how to evolve in a more a climate-friendly world. I mean, a lot of those things that we are working on. And what is great is that there is a fantastic lineup of speakers that are going to bring their expertise and experience to our audience. So it goes from Gérard Piqué. Gérard Piqué is coming not only as a footballer, obviously, but the founder and president of Cosmos. Yes. He has raised billions. He's now driving not only the Davis Cup, but also is now investing in startups. So it's quite interesting to have him. But also somebody like Kylian Jornet, the amazing mountaineers from Spain. And we will have Marcus, Mark Tatum, the deputy commissioner of the NBA. We will have, of course, Roxana Maracineanu, who is the.
So, how do people, besides Googling Global Sports Week, what's the website? Is it just globalsportsweek.com, or how do anyone find it?
Globalsportsweek.com.
Okay.
You can definitely register. It's happening from 1st to 5 February, and we will have an amazing lineup of speakers and great organization coming together. And that's I hope that you will enjoy it. I hope you will come.
I will be there.
I think it's nice to have something happening despite the situations where we can speak together and plan for a better future, but also act right now.
Absolutely. No, good stuff. Hopefully everyone made note of that, and everyone and many of the listeners will be joining you there. So let's talk a bit about inspiring sports capital, because I remember when we spoke a while back that you were working on a fund concept with some new funding in place. Again, somewhat linked a bit to the Olympics and others. So, but I haven't really heard much since then. So I'm equally curious to see what has transpired now and how this company started, because you have a partner there, right? I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So Inspiring Sport Capital is a London and Paris-based private equity company that I created with Laurent Damiani, my partner, and we're dedicating to the sports industry, leveraging our expertise in the business and our network and the evolution of its economic models and to help those companies that we are targeting to grow. So we invest in buyout or growth equity situations. And our idea is to have a majority role, and we have a long-term approach because we are supported by high net worth individuals, family, multi-family offices as well, but also some. We are part of our group of advisors are also some very experienced people from different facets of the industry and top athletes as well. And beyond financial resource, what we do is create value at NVST company by offering support in the different level of growth, opening up to the digital transformation and mainly the international expansion. So we have already completed 6 major investments so far, investing over 75 million euros. So it's a club deal concept. So we have not locked down a committed investment fund. It's deal by deal. Right. We've invested in a company called 52 Entertainment, which is actually I would call it the esports for the elder generation. So it's a platform of bridge online, and we acquired first FunBridge, a French company, and then it's a subscription-based web platform for card players, and then we acquired their let's say competitors from the US, BBO, Bridge-based online, that we acquired from Bill Gates, actually, who was the main shareholder. He's a fan of Bridge. Played with his mate Warren Buffett during the lockdown.
Probably Warren Buffett, right?
Exactly. So that's and now the two companies merged are called 52 Entertainment. So we did that with HLD, which is our main LP on this one. We also acquired a company called Jointly, SIS, for as a club management, grassroots clubs, but that we have already sold to BPC Groupe, the French bank. We have a stake in the world's leading race yacht shipyard called CDK Technology. They are the one who produce the carbon-made yacht that goes 50 knots around the world. So not the America's Cup yet, but the Vendée Globe and all the ocean race type of yachts, the one that are now flying with foils and amazing technology. So that's quite an interesting one. Small industry. And last but not least, we have struck a deal with Piggy Golf Challenge Duchel, which is a leading European wholesale golf equipment distributor. And we are building up this right now. It's quite interesting to see how golf is evolving in the way people get access to equipment, including digital. So as you can see, it's very diverse. Our idea is always to go to companies where we can provide a strong input in terms of our knowledge, our network, and our capability to find new leads for those companies. So the idea is to always multiply the value of the company by by 2.5 and 3 over a period of 5 to 6 years.
Right. So so you would call it a VC capital, right? Or is it which stage you investing in these companies?
More private equity based than VC, because we are really more on growth than on VC. We can tap into the new tech startups, but only when we find the right build up from one of our companies. So we're more in the traditional sports, trying to help those brands to become more savvy in digital than going to pure players.
Got it. Okay, interesting. And but if I remember, there was something about also sort of a bit of a focus linking investments with France, with the Olympics. Is that still part of it, or that was a different idea, and it's or?
No. It's part of that. If you think about the different, what we have here is that we have companies that have a base in Europe. France is, let's say, 50% of our position, but we have a more European wide base. And what we want to do is to find companies that can benefit from the momentum of the games, right, and build their growth on the back of this kind of driver. So it's very much aligned with all the effort that are made in Europe and in France at the moment to really support the sport industry. People recognize that this is really something that has more impact on economy than ever. So we are trying also to attract investors into that field, and yeah, the Olympic momentum is certainly something that helps to grow practice of sport and hence the consumer base and the interest of investors.
Makes sense. Now, you're not a private equity guy. You're like me, you're a sports guy. So your partner is the one who has the private equity experience, or how do you guys work?
He has worked on private equity before I started, because he started that a few years before, but he has the same background as you and me. Okay. He used to run an agency. So both, but you know what? It's all about our own experience. I've acquired and merged and managed something like 20 companies in my career. Yeah. Sure. Whether it was with Havas or Vivendi. So, negotiating the acquisition of companies, putting it up, is something that is really driven by your sense of entrepreneurship and business. Yeah. The rest is more technical. So we have a team that help us on the financial structure and the legal part of it, which is quite an important part. But for the rest, we drive it with our expertise of the sector. So in a nutshell, we would never be able to acquire company in another sector, and this is not our ambition. Right. Yeah. But in that sector, we with the right partner for the financial side and our staff that we've recruited, we are good enough to do that in the private equity field, which is not so complicated. It's I mean, great to have people with experience, and we use them, but the most important thing is to choose the right companies and help those companies to grow.
Absolutely.
The transaction is just one thing.
So you mentioned earlier that you take majority, right? So which means in some sense you are taking a fairly active role in it, so what does that mean really for you? You sitting on the board of these companies, and your weekly speaking with the CEOs, or how does that sort of really show up?
Yes, exactly. This is exactly this. You have a board. We are chairing the board, and we also have a strategic advisory board where we bring people together that helps to support the management team, and we help them on a weekly basis to make the right choices. We challenge them on some of the decisions they have to take, and we also have a control on the management accounts, and we review those on a regular basis on behalf of our investors. So it's exactly this kind of thing. But the difference maybe is that we are more proactive in the sense of brainstorming with the teams on opportunities and also connecting with the right people at the network level. So a bit less, a bit more than just a quarterly board. It's more intensive than that, but it's also the way we can unlock potential for those management teams.
Right. And so, again, PE normally has 7-10 year kind of window for exit. Is that sort of, I guess, your basic strategy as well there? You look to, obviously, as you said, ramp it up 2-3x, and then either, I guess, sell it on or find other exits for them, right?
Yeah, well, this is exactly the framework is 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. That's it. We have exactly the same model of value creation and the commission we cut on it from our side, from our company's side. But of course, it's really to create value for our LPs. And the time frame of 5 to 10 years is the right one. We have more long-term vision. We don't have any constraint, as we are not structured as a fund. There is no need to comply with a very strict time frame. We can really evolve, and if the exit is to merge with a bigger company and maybe take a minority stake after a while on a bigger company, that is also part of the kind of thing we can do. The LBO is also a great way to exit for us after a while if the management is really doing well, right. And we can find a great way to leverage the asset of the company. Then we can definitely do that as well. So we're very flexible and quite pragmatic on that sense.
Love it. Yeah, great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing more. I'll definitely going to pay more attention to the deals you guys are doing there, and then of course how the companies are doing. And we're nicely coming really to an end here. I figured this is going to be a good hour and a half conversation with the amazing things you've all done. There's no way we cover that in an hour, so I expected this. And I really just wanted to have a last one here. And you recently became the chairman of Fnatic, which is one of the top esports teams in the world out of the UK. One of the highest winning teams in the world. Anyone again in gaming or esports will recognize them. How did that happen? How do you end up in the world of gaming now here?
Well, when you start in the investment world, you need to be very curious and look at what's happening. I mentioned that we had already invested in the esports for the elderly, yes. But the real esports is fascinating. It strikes my imagination, and actually, I've always been searching for what's next in our industry. And so fostering innovation for my own business, but also for my clients or LP. So I was looking into esports to see if we could do something in terms of investment. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that Fnatic at that moment was not really looking for investment yet, but was looking for a board member. So it's something that I thought that I could do, and from board member they asked me to be the chairman. So actually I met the CEO and founder, Sam Matthews, who is a fantastic guy. He's a visionary pioneer of esports. He started the team with his mother when he was something like 22 or something like that.
Oh, right.
Originally from Australia, and he is really driving his team with a great energy. But of course, he is now facing anything that startup face at one point of time, which is scale and growth, and how you deal with bigger issues with the need to bring together shareholders from a different kind of background, and also grow the company from where it is to a much bigger turnover. So the company is about 15 million, and the objective is to multiply this by 10 over the next 5 years. Yeah. So there is a 5-year plan, and my job is really to help the team to achieve those goals, and of course lead the board where you find great entrepreneurs that have invested in this industry. And it's interesting to really see how fast this is going. what they are looking for when they hire somebody like me is something they don't have. So what they are not in need is somebody who is a specialist of e-sport, because I'm not.
Right. Yeah.
So I must say I learn every day,
Yeah.
and it's quite intense. And the pandemic has changed a little bit the model, because as you recall, the esports have been very successful in bringing together people in arenas with hundreds of thousands of followers. It does not happen yet. It's not possible. So they have completely pivoted to the digital side of it, which is already part of it.
Online.
But the and for me it's a complicated onboarding, because I am in Paris, the HQ is in London, and because of the pandemic, it's very difficult to cross the channel. Believe it or not, when you don't live in the UK, as a business traveler, you can't really go without spending a week in quarantine. Yeah. And coming back is exactly the same. So I cannot cross the channel. But the rest of the team is very much working remotely as well. So it's a digital relationship mostly for the moment, which is something of an experience as well, because it's the first time that I join a company that I'm not even meeting people for real.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. I have a couple of new projects working with in the Middle East, Israel, etc. And it's a similar thing. None of us have ever met face to face, and we're doing business together, and we become good friends in many ways. So it is possible, right? I mean, we always believe that you had to see each other, right? You had to kind of sit there and break bread or whatever. And I do believe it's still a very important part to the puzzle, of course. But I also think it shows that if you don't have the opportunity, well, you got to make it work otherwise, right? And you can still get to do business in that sense. So it's interesting that you mentioned that there. So, well, again, we'll be watching Fnatic a bit more. I'm, as you know, big into the world of gaming and esports with a host of different projects. So I'd love to have another conversation with you offline here. Maybe there's some synergies there on things you guys are doing. Last question I forgot earlier to ask on Inspiring Sports Capital is the acquisition targets are all sort of, let's say, Europe, UK based groups, or are you looking global, or what's the remit there?
What we do is we try to start with companies based close to where we operate, and from those companies we try to look at build-ups. It's exactly what I mentioned with 52 Entertainment. So it's very possible for us to look for targets outside of this European remit, but as long as it's a build-up from something we already operate. Right. The reason for that is that we need to have the management team that we are overseeing close to us, right, in terms of timeline and that sort of things. We believe that it will be difficult to us to open offices for the time being elsewhere. So we prefer to keep it closer to us. So it's not impossible to have a build-up in Asia, for example, but we won't start with a target in Asia.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Perfect. Lucien, I think we're nicely got at the end here. I think we covered really good ground, lots of great information, and I really like the way you explained your thinking of how all these different companies worked and what worked and in some degrees what didn't. And the case studies there from Paddington Bear to others. And of course, and that's what I said, I really wanted to make sure everyone understands some of the things you're doing right now, coming out of, Havas and Vivendi, and you're not there anymore, right? That's correct, right?
No. I quit Vivendi a couple of years ago. That's why I started this Inspiring Sport Capital as my main business, and Fnatic now as well. Right. And Global Sports Week is really something I'm doing to really contribute to the industry. So, but those are the three things I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, I'm certain that it was keeping you busy, and it was very exciting to hear your amazing journey here, all the way from the America's Cup where we all started there. So thank you so much for your time there. Have a good day in Paris. Stay safe, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Marcus, and congratulations on the podcast. And I hope that you will connect to Global Sports Week, and I hope that our audience today will connect to Global Sports Week and to meet you all in a couple of weeks from now. And take care. as well.
Yeah, we will release definitely before your event, so hopefully that will motivate more folks to come and join you and listen in.
Definitely. That's great. Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.